the TF. Dr. Clary won't be able to join us today, but we have a great presentation for you. We have Meghan Taylor here. She is a current PhD student in Performing Arts Health. She's going to be giving us a sampler of the benefits and resources that she can give you for learning more about Performing Arts Health and using it for your own health and benefits as performers. So please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, everybody. I have a lot of things I want to talk to you guys about today, so I'm not going to spend too much time on myself, but like Elena said, I am a second-year PhD student here. I'm also in the Music Entrepreneurship program. I'm a clarinetist here at UNT as well, and currently I'm working on a project that was funded with a $40,000 grant from the National Institute of Health to help integrate performing arts health in secondary schools in the Denton area. That's just a little bit about me. I do want to do one little disclaimer before I start. I am not a medical professional, so anything that I'm saying here is not medical advice, but if you're experiencing any problems or pain, just seek help from a medical professional as soon as possible. So I'd like to start off by just kind of discussing what is performing arts health. So this is a discipline that is charged with understanding the occupational demands associated with learning and performing music and other fine arts such as dance or theater or acting. This discipline has actually been around for quite a while. In the 1700s, the father of occupational medicine, Bernardino Ramazzini, in his treatise of diseases of workers, his treatise, he identified voice trainers and singers and lute string makers as having ailments associated with what they did as a craft. So despite this not being totally new, it really didn't start taking off in the United States until about 1987 when Martin Fishbein, he conducted a survey of the International Conference of Society and Opera Musicians. He found that of the 2,000 respondents, about 82% of them had a problem associated with pain that was directly from their playing, and about 76% of these people found that this problem impacted their playing in some way. In 1999, this is really the Cliff Notes version of Performing Arts Health history here, but in 1999, the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health was founded by Chris Chesky here at UNT, directly charged with studying musicians and giving them some additional resources in our community to combat these kinds of issues. In 2006, Health Promotion in Schools of Music took place here at UNT. This was an international conference that was directly about helping schools of music in the United States learn how to deal with things like hearing loss or room exposure, all of these sorts of things that we deal with every day when we are tasked with doing repetitive motions, holding odd postures for extended periods of time. Then, in 2011, the accrediting body for tertiary level schools in the United States, which is the NASM, the National Association of Schools of Music, ratified an accreditation standard that said all students, faculty, and staff should be aware of performing arts health-related issues through the education system. And then in 2013, Texas followed suit, mandating that these kinds of things should be discussed in secondary schools, so like your high schools and your middle schools, particularly in ensemble-based instructional activities like band, choir, and orchestra. All right, so that's really the Cliff Notes version of Performing Arts Health. What I really want to talk to you guys about is kind of the 6 key areas that I see in Performing Arts Health. So I'm going to start off with musculoskeletal. We'll just kind of go down the line here, getting through some things. If you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand. If not, we can save them for me to the end. Either way is fine with me. So, for musculoskeletal problems, like I said, Martin Fishbein found that about 82% of people had problems associated with playing their instrument. My friend Kinsley and I actually just did a clarinet study, and we found that 90% of clarinetists experienced pain in the past year associated with playing their clarinet. So 90%, that's a lot of people having problems, but how do these problems happen? So it's really a 3-factor situation that can lead to injury. So the first is going to be force, which is anything that's weighting down your instrument. In this case, the trombonist is holding the instrument in his left hand, and so it's kind of putting that weight on the left side of the body. But for clarinet, it's different. It's on the right thumb. Posture is how you're sitting, how you're holding the instrument. Repetition is going to be the hours you're spending every day playing, in rehearsals, in your practice time, anytime you're engaging with the instrument. If any one of these three things is out of whack, maybe you suddenly have a lot more practicing you need to be doing, or maybe you've changed your technique a little bit and you're holding your posture the wrong way, that's what can contribute to a potential for injury. So how can we start to think about ourselves as reframing it in a way that prevents us from having these problems? So I'd like to talk about three different things that you can incorporate into your life to try to mitigate some of these issues. So the first being warm-up. So traditionally, you might think of warm-up as kind of like an aerobic exercise where you're just really like stretching out your body. While that can be helpful, it's also important to kind of get in the zone mentally when you are preparing to practice. The current literature is saying that doing the same kind of routine every time you get ready can really help you get into the zone before you're playing so that your body just knows naturally how to respond to what you're asking it to do on your instrument. And then as far as breaks and rest goes, we all know that taking rest and taking breaks is good during practice, but what should we actually be doing when we are, say, taking a break? So it's important to take these breaks, but you might want to consider doing some light stretching, maybe get up and go for a walk, do some listening or some mental practice, something that allows you to stay in the zone but keeps you off your instrument for just a few minutes during the length of your whole practice time. You also want to make sure that you're not on your phone or on your computer, because if you're thinking about like how you're playing your instrument, you're using all of these forearm muscles in your hands. Well, if you're on your phone, you're activating the same muscle patterns. So you're not really taking a break if you're doing those sorts of activities during your practice. Now, let's say you've practiced for an hour and you've taken a break in the middle, and then you're going to go back like this afternoon and practice again. You'll want to go back into that same kind of mental warm-up that you did before if it's been an extended period of time before you've picked up your instrument again. And then at the end of your practice sessions, just cooling down and doing some stretches, maybe doing some meditation or something to kind of get yourself out of that mental practice space in order to get back into your regular daily life. So I want to talk about the importance of a phenomenon known in medicine called the time to fatigue scale. So whenever we're asking our body to do a task, there is a finite amount of time we can do the task before we reach fatigue, tension, pain, and then ultimately failure. So let's say we've started our practice session, we're playing along, and it's pretty easy for us. We're just doing things like we normally do. At a certain point, maybe it's 30 minutes in, maybe it's 15, depending on how long you've been playing your instrument for, or maybe how long you've had a break for previously before your last practice session, and you start to fatigue. Then you start to develop tension if you keep playing, and then ultimately leading to pain, and then the final step would be failure. So if you are continuing to go down this state of playing and ignoring these physical symptoms of pain and tension and fatigue leading to failure, that's also when we're kind of contributing to this potential for injury. But as musicians, we're not always going to be able to just practice for the 20 minutes. We need to kind of build up some endurance in order to be able to play for some longer rehearsal times or practice sessions, whatever it may be. So how can we actually do that? Well, literature says that consistent practice, adequate rest, and builds endurance. So what does that mean? Well, back to this other slide, if we are getting into the fatigue area and we're letting our body have that chance to rest, we are moving backwards in the continuum, back over to our ease of play. And each time we do that, we're giving ourselves like that recovery. I think about like playing a video game and like you go underwater and like the breath thing like starts to decrease and you like go for air and like it fills back up. It's like, kind of like that phenomenon is happening when we are giving ourselves consistent practice with adequate rest, leading to endurance. So how can we kind of gauge whether or not we're building endurance or contributing to our potential for injury? So this is that time to fatigue scale I just showed you. Now, if we're building endurance, we're hopefully lengthening the time that it takes us to get to that fatiguing point over the course of our performance. But if we find ourselves shortening our time to fatigue, like it's taking less and less time for us to get tired, that's when you might be leading towards potential for injury. So what I've started doing in my own practice is just keeping a little note in my practice journal about how long it took me before I felt tired and when I needed to take a break, and just keeping track of that over time. If I'm seeing those times increase, it's a good thing. If I'm seeing them decrease, I might consider changing some of my habits in order to feel a little bit more secure moving forward. And the last thing I want to just bring up briefly, is all pain bad? So not necessarily. We have some words on the left here, growing pains that are things like tired, tension, tightness, discomfort. Like if you think about it, the first time you go to the gym after 3 weeks, you do lift some weights, you're going to be sore the next day. Like that's normal. So if you're trying a new technique with your instrument or you added a new rehearsal to your schedule, that's going to be normal to have some of these things happening to you. But if you're feeling any sharp pain, stabbing pain, pinching pain, that's important to really take a look at and consider getting some medical attention. And lastly, the idea of developing core strength is important for athletic performance, but it can also be translated to music. So just pick something that you enjoy and you want to do consistently and try to get 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week of some kind of cardio. It can be anything from biking, swimming, ballroom dancing. We even see in people that are training for the Tour de France, they're not just working on the bicycle all day. They do ab exercises. They do things to strengthen their core because they found that having a strong core just improves their overall performance. So that's kind of the end of my musculoskeletal health section. I want to move into hearing health now. Hearing health is a really hot button topic in the performing arts health community. It's kind of a spice in the literature, so I'm just going to give you some brief highlights on it, but I do want to stress that this is really important for us as musicians. Right now, the World Health Organization is estimating that 1.1 billion young people are at risk for hearing loss. I don't have my phone with me, but due to personal listening devices, so it's like your cell phones, earbuds, anything like that. So this information is good for not only you as musicians, but for everyone in the world. So to briefly explain how sound encounters your ear and is translated to the brain, it comes in the ear through the ear canal, it hammers the eardrum, goes through the 3 middle bones of the ear, and comes into contact with the cochlea, which is that little spiral-looking snail thing on the screen. And then there's a bunch of hair cells in the cochlea that are pushed up, or a membrane is pushed down on the hair cells, and that's what translates sound to your brain. So when we have acoustic energy, this is anything from live music performances. What I'm doing right now is creating some sound energy, personal listening devices, sporting events, machinery. That's all being picked up and translated through this system into your brain. What happens when our hair cells get worn out over time? They start to look like this. I'm sorry, this projector is not super great, but the right side of the screen is going to be some damaged hair cells. That is very serious because they never come back once they've been damaged. So how can we know what is too much? So we have a measurement tool in hearing health literature that's called the decibel. This is a logarithmic scale, which basically just means for every 3 dB increase, we are doubling the amount of energy that is put out by that sound or by that sound. So this is a decibel scale. You can look these up online, but it just kind of relates like what the measurement is to something in the real world. Like 90 decibels is about a hairdryer. A police siren is 120 decibels. So this is all just for your basic knowledge on kind of referring to what it might sound like when I get into this next slide here. So how can we apply, actually I want to talk about one other thing. So with the decibel, it's a logarithmic, so every 3 dB increase is double the energy. But we also have what we call dBLEQ, which is amount of energy over time, so over like a length of an hour or any time that you set. So how does this apply to music? Well, in music, we put out sound, and the measurement we can use to characterize the intensity is dB. And in fact, other industries have kind of started to regulate sound measurements. OSHA and NIOSH are the 2 government agencies that are responsible for mitigating problems in factories. So they came out with a statistic that said 85 decibels is bad, and you shouldn't let anything happen over 85 decibels in your factory without doing some modifications for your workers. So how many people have heard that 85 dB thing before? Probably a lot of people. I want to ask you, what is the difference between factory noise and music? Just name out some things that you might perceive are different about them. Yes.
Factory noise is often constant.
Constant, yep. So constant, steady state. Anything else? How many of you want to listen to factory noise all day? How many of you want to listen to music? I do. Yeah. So factory noise is, like you said, steady state. It's also something that you probably don't want to listen to necessarily. That 85 decibel measurement that they made the cutoff, it's based on an 8-hour workday for 40 hours a week over a 40-year work life. I know for me as a musician, I'm not necessarily playing straight through for 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week, and I don't know if I'll be playing 40 years. Hopefully I'll be playing longer than that, but we'll see. So that's kind of some differences between factory noise. So it's inappropriate just to directly apply that statistic to music. And also, 85 dB is really not that loud. On there, I said 90 dB was a hairdryer. I think I've been to concerts that are way louder than that. But how do we know if it is risky or not? What's something in music that I'm not doing a very good job of leading this question, so I'll just tell you, but we love variability in music, which is the opposite of that steady state noise that we talked about. What is variability in music? Dynamics, yes. So dynamics have been shown to decrease your risk of hearing loss, but also it just makes better music. So the more you're able to play with dynamics, the better. All right, and the last thing I'd like to talk about, just because I think you should be aware, is the earplug question here. So you're going to find yourself in situations where excessive noise is unavoidable. You might be mowing the lawn, you might be using machinery, you might be at a sporting event. Just this weekend I heard that the Kansas City game reported a maximum dB level of 142 decibels. So if you're in that environment, you definitely want to have something to protect your ear. And I'm sure you guys have all seen the earplugs on the left here, marketed specifically for musicians. I just want to make you aware of some of the problems that exist with these products. Briefly, there are lots of more things I could talk about. We've done some testing here at the TCPH that says specifically why they are not adequate. If you would like more information, just talk to me after. But number one, the testing protocol for these earplugs was used for factory noise, and we just talked about how different factory noise is from music, so it's inappropriate to apply that to these products. Number two, it doesn't take into account, the testing protocol does not take into account frequencies below middle C, which is a lot of where we find the most sound energy in music. I mean, think about if you're in band, they always do this like triangle where it's like everyone in the low end needs to be louder, and then everyone on the top needs to be quieter, that kind of balance. Having no protection in the low end is not good if you're a musician. In fact, our research has shown that these may even increase the risk of exposure at low registers, low frequencies. Finally, the company with a patent for these products was just fined, is it $9.1 million? $9.1 million from the government for knowingly selling defective earplugs to the military. And they're also marketing these products for musicians. So, my advice, stay away from these products if you have them. I have several pairs in my house that I don't wear anymore. Just get yourself some drugstore foam earplugs. Also, you can be an advocate for yourself in the community. We should have products that work for musicians. Because the foam earplugs, I know playing with them really sucks. But right now, this is the best we've got. So that's what I just want to say about the earplugs. It's spicy. If you want to know more, just let me know. Vocal health. So I'm sure, are there any singers in the room? A lot of you. You guys are probably way more versed in like how to deal with the voice as a singer, but I want to talk about some things that will still apply to you, but for more of a professional voice user. So this person is anyone that earns a percentage of their income from speaking, using their voice. So this would be your teachers, your singers, of course, lawyers, waiters, anyone that's going to be talking for a living. Just some statistics about voice users in the United States. The Department of Labor says that 25% of the population depends on their voice for their work. 6% of these employed adults are teachers, teachers' aides, assistants, all of these types of things. And estimations of voice disorders in teachers range from 11 to 38%. And women are more likely to experience a vocal problem over men. Now, I found this particularly fascinating, so it's hard to tell on here, but the left coin is a dime, and then the middle is a nickel, and then a quarter. And the two left are how big the vocal cords are for a female, and the two right are how big they are in a male. So these little flaps of skin are so powerful, and they can do so much for our communication. It's really important to try to keep them healthy. I also wanted to show you just a video of how the vocal folds work, because I think if you've never seen it before, it's really fascinating how the mechanism actually functions in your body. This is super slow motion. little flaps of skin are just going back and forth, creating you, having you be able to project your feelings and anything to the world. It's pretty incredible how this can make us speak and sing and do all sorts of amazing things. So if you are experiencing some vocal fatigue, how can you know? Anything that's listed here is something that you might want to consider as a vocal fatigue issue. Hoarseness, loss of voice, pain in your neck and shoulders, neck and throat pain, pain on swallowing, any unsteady voice. But how can we work to keep our vocal folds happy like we just saw in the video? Number one is just staying hydrated. I know Dr. Austin likes to talk about peeing pale, which is kind of gross, but if you are more hydrated, your urine is more likely to be like a pale yellow or a clear color. That's a good thing. Rest, take adequate vocal rest. So if you are a teacher, especially in a public school trying to speak over an ensemble, any moment you have where you cannot talk during the day is good. It also goes back to that time to fatigue scale that we were talking about earlier. So if you're giving yourself that time to be silent, you're moving that dial back up towards your ease of speaking. Avoid smoking and vaping and any of those sorts of things. I know what Dr. Austin also likes to say, it's like making beef jerky out of your vocal folds because you're just putting warm, dry air over that mechanism. Decreasing the stress in your life, it's good for everything, but also can be good for your voice. And be cautious about the medications you're taking when you're sick. NSAIDs like aspirin and Midol and ibuprofen can all have a negative impact on your voice if you are singing or speaking too much with those. Only Tylenol is safe. I know there's a website that has like a whole list of how all the medications you could be on impact your voice, and so if you're interested, probably seek out one of your voice friends, or I would be able to find it through Dr. Austin as well. And finally, to encourage healthy speaking voices using an energized, resonant, not too high, not too low, not too loud sound. That's kind of some tips for voice. Now for hydration. Hydration, we all know that our body is made up of mostly water. 55 to 75% is kind of the general rule of thumb. Maintaining adequate hydration levels is important for not only our physical, but also our cognitive well-being. If you're experiencing thirst, you're already dehydrated. And even just a little dehydration can still impact your performance. So, a mild dehydration can change your mood, impair cognitive functions such as short-term memory, alertness, and concentration. This is especially true in children. So it really affects the way you're thinking and how your brain is working. It also, in this study, they found that athletes can lose 6 to 10% of their body weight during a strenuous activity, but a decrease in their physical performance was noted with just 2% dehydration. So very little dehydration can impact both your cognitive and your physical well-being. So we always get the question, how much water is enough? The answer is we don't really know, but 60 to 70 ounces of water is a great place to start. That's about 8 cups of water per day. We recommend you keep a water bottle with you. I've got my cup right here. Also avoid sugar-sweetened beverages like sodas, juices, any of those sorts of things can contribute to your dehydration. All right, and hygiene is our next topic. Hygiene, this is not exactly like taking a shower, but that's always a good thing. Wearing deodorant, also a great thing. This is more like how to maintain your instruments so you avoid things like trombone, lung, and other scary venereal diseases from getting your instrument. The next picture I'm going to show you is slightly graphic, so sorry if you're a little squeamish, but I found some Facebook and I just had to put it up here. It's too good. All right. Ooh. Okay, so microbial contamination on instruments is a major problem that can lead to adverse health concerns. In a study, 100% of instruments were found to have some sort of contaminant like mold, yeast, or bacteria on it. Reed instruments, go clarinet, had higher occurrences of these contaminants when compared to flutes and trumpets. These microbes are able to last between 24 to 48 hours, and one of them even lasts up to 13 days, which is a long time. So we know, basically the fact is that your instrument has some gross stuff on it. So what are the causes of these things? The number one is just irregular cleaning of your instrument. Number two, failure to dry your instrument after you're using it. Number three, not changing your water that you're using to soak your reeds if you're a reed player. And interestingly enough, the age of the reed in your instrument was not a factor in whether or not bacteria was present. You're going to have it no matter if the reed is 1 day old or 2 years old. So how can we ensure that these things don't happen? Well, to restate the obvious, regular cleaning of your instruments, using a swab to thoroughly dry them, especially if you're a reed player, changing your reed water. For you string and keyboard players, I haven't found any studies that have been conducted on your instruments, but I imagine that it's a good idea to just wash your hands before and after you're playing, just because your hands are dirty. I imagine also going into the communal practice building with all those pianos. I'm sure not everyone is washing their hands before they're playing, so it's a good idea. Wash your hands before and after you play, especially those things. All right, and our final, I'm going to go over just a couple of ideas here and then talk about performance anxiety at the end to kind of wrap up. So, with mental health, I think the number one thing that we can kind of do to establish where we are in the world is understand a little bit more about our identity and how we relate to ourselves and to other people. So I'd like to start off just by asking you to reflect on a few questions. So, what contributed to your uniqueness as an individual? Was it your family, your religion, your culture, maybe your race, maybe your skills, maybe the opportunities you had or didn't have? Think about the journey to where you are now. Who and what do you remember along the way? Maybe you got the opportunity to study abroad. Maybe you got a new job. Maybe you studied with a specific teacher that really had an impact on you, or joined a new student organization or a club. Maybe you had a really impactful mentor that's poured time into you. How were you treated as you evolved? Were you encouraged by your peers or your mentors? Did you feel slighted? Did you feel discouraged at any point? Were you happy? All of these things contribute to how we frame ourselves in the world. So this tripartite model of personal identity just shows that there is a universal level of belongingness for humans, and then belongingness within different groups. So maybe your gender, your sexual orientation, your marital status, your religious preferences. And then you also have uniqueness as an individual. And how these groups relate to each other can help you to know how maybe the person next to you is dealing with their own personal demons or anything that they're going on. So just keeping this in mind, that everyone's got their own place in the world and everyone's got their own groups, is important for moving forward to this next idea that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So some of you probably know about this, if not in name, at least in practice. So Maslow basically said that the lower levels of this pyramid have to be fulfilled before you can reach the pinnacle, which is self-actualization, or reaching your full potential. So I'll just briefly go through these, but the first thing is your physiological needs. This is anything like very basic, like food, water, warmth, shelter, clothing, sleep, any of those sorts of things. If they're not satisfied, your body just can't function optimally. He considered these the most important, and all other needs are secondary until this basic foundation is met. Safety needs is the next level. These are protection from the elements, security, order of law, stability, freedom from fear. The third is love and belongingness. After physiological and safety needs have been fulfilled, the third level is the social and involves a feeling of belongingness. So this would be like your interpersonal relationships, ability to develop intimacy, trust, acceptance, receiving and giving affection and love, being part of a group, family, friends, and ensemble. And then finally, or fourth, is esteem needs. And these are kind of broken up into two categories, which is your esteem for oneself, so your own dignity, your mastery, your independence, and then your reputation from others and respect from others, so any prestige or status that you might be seeking. Now, all of these levels, without having having all of these levels in place is what's going to lead you to be able to reach your full potential, including any creative endeavors that we're pursuing, like music. So, especially if you're a teacher or someone that's dealing with other personalities in your life at all, understanding that if someone is missing one of these key foundational bricks can have a huge impact on how they're seeing themselves in the world. And I think being able to empathize with that is really important for moving forward with developing a relationship with them. All right. Lastly, everyone's favorite demon, music performance anxiety. So in the literature, there's the lucky 2% that don't experience any performance anxiety symptoms. But for the rest of us, we have things that are either cognitive or somatic, meaning things that happen in your mind, in your body, Anything that happens in your mind could be like negative thoughts, loss of concentration, fear of failure. Somatic is going to be those butterflies, your sweaty palms, dry mouth. Anything like that can impact your performance. So we know that performing in front of an audience can produce a stress response in the body, but how do we take this stress response that is related to flight or flight and turn it into fuel for our performance? So I'd like to challenge you to reframe music performance anxiety for positive outcomes. However, with a caveat, there's two things that you need in place before you can start to change some of your mindset. So the first being preparedness. So this says your students, but it also applies to you if you were a professional. Ensure that you've thoroughly prepared for your performances. If you are not practicing your instrument enough, getting in the time, doing yoga is not going to help you play the clarinet better. I'm sorry to break it to you. Also, giving your students opportunities to perform so they can be, or you opportunities to perform so you can be successful and learn how your body responds under pressure is the best way to start building self-confidence. So that means getting together with a group of buddies and having a little jam session together, if you're leading up to a big performance, or playing for one person on your couch, playing for your dog, something that is going to get you in the mindset of performing, but in a low stress environment, so you can learn how your body reacts and learn how to adapt and kind of increase that over time. Maybe you play with your friends once and then you challenge yourself to play for your broken up studio class, and then maybe you play for the full group studio class, and then finally you have your junior recital or senior recital, whatever it might be. Now, if you have those two areas in place, so you're prepared and you have built up your self-confidence over time, that's when you can start incorporating mindfulness practices into your daily life if you're still having, especially any somatic symptoms or some mental symptoms that are going along with performance anxiety. So your yoga, your meditation, visualization, progressive muscle relaxation, any of these things, I'm sure you guys all know at least kind of a basic of what they are, but if you need more resources, I'm happy to share anything that I know about. There's also some free, not free, but a semester pass of yoga for yoga on campus is $25. So there's some resources here at UNT that you can use if you want to start incorporating these things into your life. Now, when we're talking about anxiety, something as simple as reframing it as excitement has been shown to decrease your symptoms and improve performance. So this is directly out of a study from the Harvard Business School where Allison Wood Brooks brought a group of people into a room, split them up and said, okay, this group is going to say nothing before their performance, this group is going to say I'm excited, this group is going to say I'm anxious. She found that, of course, the people that said that they were excited did better on the performance, and they felt better about it too. So just changing your wording can really improve how your mind is perceiving what's happening to you. And then in addition, you can try to set realistic and achievable goals for the performance ahead of time. I went to a master class one time for a clarinetist, and he said he allows himself 5 mistakes in the concert, and then somehow that makes him feel a little bit better. So if you are willing to let yourself maybe make that one mistake that you might make on your concert, it can just take some of the pressure off and change your mindset a little bit about how you are experiencing the anxiety. And the final recommendation I have for dealing with performance anxiety is actually out of an article that I read about dancers, but I think it can apply to musicians as well. It's back to that cross-training idea of doing something besides what you do all the time in order to train your brain in a different way. Before we were talking about training your body, but this is now talking about training your brain. So Dr. Houston, or the psychologist who works with the Houston Ballet, Brian Goonan, said that it's important to keep your mental and physical resource pool high. You can't, getting proper sleep, eating well to fuel your body, and having good emotional hygiene, such as maintaining hobbies outside of dance and making time to unwind with friends. In fact, if you are physically depleted, your mind will allocate more effort to sustaining your body, and as a result, you'll be less psychologically able to deal with the things that make you anxious. In a quote, he said, "You can't pull from an empty pool that's drained." So, I mean, that just is back to that, you can't pour from an empty cup. I've seen that meme going around Instagram lately. So, doing something that you like outside of playing your instrument or doing music is important, not only for your physical well-being, especially if you happen to choose some kind of sporting activity, but also even photography or drawing, something that can be creative to exercise that muscle, but just get you out of what you do all the time can help you maintain your mental and physical well-being. All right, to wrap up, I've got a couple of takeaways for you. So number one, rest when your body says rest, when you need it. Number two, use hearing protection when you're exposed to unavoidable sound levels. Remember I said 1.1 billion people are at risk for hearing loss? That's quite a large number. Maybe consider turning down the volume on your phone at times as well. Dynamics in music will lower your risk for hearing damage and also just help you make better music in general. Hydration is key. Cross-training can help you improve your overall physical and mental health. So go find a hobby and get some cardio in every week. And wash your instruments and probably your hands too. And just some final thoughts because I like this picture. We're all here because we love music and we want to make a career out of our collective passion. Understanding the basics of performing arts health can serve as a foundation for a healthy career and allow you to reach optimal performance. In the words of Bernardino Ramazzini, it is much better to prevent than to cure, and it's so much easier to foresee future harm and avoid it rather than have to get rid of it after having fallen prey. Thank you. We have some different questions.
Before we get into questions, can you talk a little bit about the Musicians Health and Wellness Center here on campus?
Yes, I sure can. Let me put it up on the screen. Okay. I do want to have a slide with a few resources for you that are on campus. I don't know if you can see this super well, but there are phone numbers and stuff on here. So the three main things that I was going to discuss with you guys are the Music Medicine Student Clinic. This is a free clinic ran by the Health Science Center on campus in Chestnut Hall. Dr. Survey, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Ashton work in the clinic 2 days a week where you can go and receive free medical treatment. I've been seeing them recently for some TMJ symptoms that I've been having, and it's been amazing. So if you haven't gone over to see them yet and you're having a problem, please seek out that resource. The only way you can book an appointment is if you call the phone number on the screen. It's the magic number, so take a picture of it now while it's up. Muriel Reynolds is the counselor. She does, I've heard wonderful work at the Counseling Service Center in Chestnut Hall. Her email and phone number are also up here. I know she does work with performance anxiety and helping you to kind of navigate some of those issues. And then the other resource I want to talk about is the Speech and Hearing Center. This is where you can go and get your hearing attested, or if you're having, I believe Kensley, the Speech and Hearing Center does vocal problems as well, right? Like a scope if you have voice issues.
Yeah, they also refer out that it's a lot on the sliding scale.
Yeah, so all of that's on a sliding scale. If you're having any concerns about hearing and vocal issues, that's the resource for that. Yes.
And for musicians, they make custom ear protection that's like $100 instead of $4 or $5
Yes.
for those.
There's some, yeah, we can talk about that more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not as many problems with those, but some concerns. So, yeah. Yes.
I'm curious about that. Can you go into the concerns about the other earplugs that you showed or custom ones?
The custom ones, it's still the same testing protocol as the other earplugs. So there's still like that level of concern, and then also the amount of reduction that they're saying you're getting is not necessarily accurate. So, go ahead.
One of the other things is the custom earplugs are often fixed while your jaw is like shut. But if you're playing your instrument and then you're opening it, it actually expands your eardrum, and so it can
Your
be
ear
quite-
canal. Yeah.
Your ear canal, and it can be quite painful if you're using the custom ones.
It's the audiology community and the music community just really need more collaboration overall. So if you know of anyone that's wanting to do research, or if you're wanting to do research yourself, come talk to me. I can point you in some directions of people that would want to work on these issues. So also, this is Kensley Beal. She's another second-year PhD student. If you see her walking around and have any questions, she's an excellent resource for any of these kinds of things as well. So, any other questions? Oh, come on. I know there's people that posted questions on their Facebook page. I did see, or on the entrepreneurship page. I did see one. I don't know who posted it. Oh, yes.
Did you have an experience that made you want to go into this field, or were you just like, that was interesting?
Yes, I did. So I really struggled with performance anxiety when I was an undergrad. Like, could not get up and play in front of anyone. And so my teacher, he just made me in every single studio class, I had to play an etude for like 6 months. It was grueling, but it made me a lot better at performing. And when I was working on my undergraduate thesis for the honors program, I just chose to work on music performance anxiety and did a master's thesis on it. Found out about this program on Facebook actually from just an article someone shared into my newsfeed, and applied, and here I am. So, yes.
So what is the career path for you when you get this PhD in performing arts?
Yeah, so this is a brand new program, and Kensley and I are actually the first the first two in the class of students ever. So there's not really like this is the next step kind of job lined up, but I'm hoping to get a career in academia. I've been working in the Entrepreneurship department with Dr. Clary on some things to develop a business plan for what I'd like to market for teachers. So having my own kind of side gig, and then hopefully a career in academia is kind of where I see myself going next. That's a great question. Any other questions? Yes.
So regarding working with teachers, a few people on our discussion board posted asking how can we as performers approach our teachers with our performing arts health issues and concerns, especially mental health?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say that the first step to normalizing a problem is talking about it. So the best thing to do is just, if you feel comfortable talking to your particular private lesson teacher, do it. If not, find a colleague that you trust or a different mentor in your program or your department that you trust, and go to them with whatever issue you have. Likely, if they haven't experienced it directly themselves, they probably know someone that has that can point you in the right direction. For mental health, that is it's a hard topic to just say, like, just talk about your mental health issues with someone. But if you haven't considered therapy, I would definitely try it. I personally never thought therapy was for me until I started it about 6 months ago, and it's been like a game changer. So the only way that these issues are going to be more normal is just by talking about it, but don't talk about it with someone that you don't feel comfortable with. So if you have issues with your private lesson instructor, I would suggest just finding another mentor to try to work through some of these issues with, and then bring the resources that you find from them to your private lesson instructor to kind of back you up. I did see someone on the Facebook, I keep saying Facebook, it's not a Facebook group, the Canvas page, said what are the most prevalent injuries. It's actually interesting that they posed that question, because if you think about just musical instruments in general, they're all so different, right? So the injuries that a clarinetist has are not necessarily going to be the same as a trombonist. So Kensley and I found that the inside of the bottom lip was the most prevalent and influential pain site for clarinetists, followed up by the right wrist and thumb area, which is the 2 points of contact of your instrument. I know that the guitar study that our colleague Neil did a couple years ago said that it was the right thenar, one of the right thenar, and then like the lower back area. So every instrument's going to be different as far as what the injuries cover, which I think is kind of cool and unique, but also really poses a challenge for the medical community, because if they're serving musicians, they have to know a very broad range of not only how the instrument works and how you hold it, but how do we treat so many different injuries. So it's really fascinating. Anything else? Are there any other questions on the Facebook page? Or keep saying Facebook.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
So as far as you mentioned with your instructor kind of dealing with performance anxiety, so you said that you were doing some etudes that kind of helped.
Yeah.
So I guess what was the shifting point for you when you're kind of you're working through these etudes? Was there a method that you were using that sort of helped that, or?
I'm trying to recall back, because it has been a couple of years now. But I believe that I was just assigned an etude every week, and then they were short, 4-line etudes. There was nothing super crazy, very basic rhythms and scales. And the goal was just for me to be able to get through the piece without having a breakdown. And so once I could do that, I was fine playing in lessons, but it was just the mental block of suddenly I'm in front of all these people. And I've had performance anxiety issues since I was very young. Playing softball, I used to stand in batter's cage or batter's box just staring because I wouldn't swing because people were watching me. So it was just an issue that I had for a long time, and I think just getting used to the fact that people were listening to me And also just realizing that it's just music. If I made a mistake, like no one's gonna care. They're gonna care more if I stop playing altogether than me just pushing through. So that might not work for everyone. I was probably just kind of a unique basket case of anxiety when I was first starting out. But if you have other questions like that, I can definitely show you some resources. Sometimes like journaling really helps for people, like putting yourself in that situation just visually, mentally, and visualizing your performance through journaling can just really do wonders. So there's lots of different ways you can approach anxiety, and it's not really like a one-size-fits-all for everyone. You kind of have to experiment. Yeah.
Do you have any feelings about imposter syndrome, and do you think that really exists? Do you think that's really a thing? Like, and is that sort of fall under the heading of mental health?
Yeah, let me say I haven't done any research into reading of the literature on imposter syndrome personally, but anecdotally I think it exists, definitely. I feel a little bit like an imposter standing up here presenting this to you all right now. But I do think that through certain methods you can overcome that. So.
Okay.
I do have one more slide. This is just my contact information. I did create like a little form. If you don't mind filling out some feedback for me on this presentation, that would be amazing. You can just take a quick picture with a QR code. That would be so great. Anytime I would be open. I would love your feedback so I can continue to improve as a presenter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.